The call came in at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Multi-car accident on Route 9. Ambulances delayed by weather. Multiple casualties bleeding out on the highway. In a small town with one doctor who was out of state and a volunteer EMT crew that was overwhelmed, someone remembered that the veterinarian had medical training. What they didn't know was that Dr. Amanda Foster hadn't just studied medicine. She'd practiced it in the most dangerous conditions imaginable, and she'd never forgotten how to save lives when there was nowhere else to turn. Welcome to Stories of Secret Heroes. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden medical expertise and life-saving courage, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who heal in ways we never expect. Millbrook Veterinary Clinic sat on the edge of town where farmland met the main road, a converted barn that Dr. Amanda Foster had transformed into a modern animal hospital 8 years earlier. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and dog treats, the walls lined with photos of grateful pet owners and the animals she'd saved. It was exactly the kind of peaceful practice Amanda had dreamed of. No emergencies that couldn't wait until morning, no life or death decisions made under impossible pressure. Amanda was 42 now, with auburn hair kept in a practical ponytail and hands that showed the small scars of working with frightened animals. She wore scrubs covered in cheerful animal prints and moved through her clinic with the calm competence that made pet owners trust her with their most beloved companions. The people of Millbrook knew Dr. Foster as the veterinarian who'd drive out to farms at 2 a.m. to deliver a difficult calf, who never charged families struggling to pay for their pets' medical care, who somehow always knew exactly what was wrong with animals that couldn't tell her where it hurt. She had a reputation for performing medical miracles on creatures that other vets had given up on, and for showing the kind of compassion that made saying goodbye to a beloved pet a little easier to bear. What they didn't know was Amanda's story before Millbrook. 10 years earlier, Dr. Amanda Foster had been Staff Sergeant Amanda Chen, U.S. Army combat medic assigned to forward operating bases in Afghanistan. For 8 years, she'd been the person soldiers called when someone was bleeding out, when field hospitals were too far away, when the only choice was to treat catastrophic injuries with whatever supplies were available and hope it was enough to keep someone alive until they could reach advanced medical care. Amanda had been exceptionally good at combat medicine. She'd saved dozens of lives in conditions that would have overwhelmed most medical professionals, treating gunshot wounds while under fire, performing emergency surgeries in desert tents with minimal equipment, stabilizing trauma patients for helicopter evacuations that might not come for hours. But 8 years of saving soldiers in war zones had left Amanda with PTSD that made loud noises feel like incoming mortar rounds and sudden movements look like potential threats. She'd left the army not because she'd lost her medical skills, but because she needed to use them in places where the injuries came from accidents instead of attacks, where healing didn't happen against a backdrop of violence. Veterinary medicine had seemed like the perfect transition. The medical principles were similar, the surgical techniques transferable, and the patients couldn't be sent back to combat once she'd healed them. Amanda had completed veterinary school using her GI benefits, moved to a small town where nobody knew her military background, and built the quiet practice she'd dreamed of during her deployment years. For 8 years it had worked perfectly. Amanda had found peace in treating animals, satisfaction in helping families care for their pets, and a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with warfare. She'd become part of Millbrook's community, known as the gentle vet who could fix anything wrong with the animals people loved. But Amanda Foster could never really stop being a combat medic. The training was too deep, the instincts too automatic, the medical knowledge too comprehensive to simply disappear because she'd changed careers. She'd just learned to apply her trauma medicine expertise to veterinary patients instead of wounded soldiers. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday evening in November while Amanda was finishing up paperwork in her clinic. Fire Chief Mike Patterson was on the line, his voice tight with the kind of stress that meant people were in serious trouble. "Doc Foster, we need your help. Multi-car accident on Route 9, 5 vehicles involved, at least 8 casualties. Ambulances are stuck 40 minutes out because of the ice storm, and we've got people bleeding bad. Sarah Martinez is doing what she can, but she's overwhelmed, and Doc Williams is in Kansas City until Thursday." Amanda knew the situation immediately. Sarah Martinez was Millbrook's head EMT, excellent at basic life support but not equipped for trauma surgery. Dr. Williams was the town's only physician, and with him out of state there was no one within an hour's drive who could handle serious medical emergencies. "Mike, I'm a veterinarian," Amanda said carefully. "I can't treat human patients. Doc, we've got a kid who's going to bleed out before the ambulances get here. Sarah says if someone doesn't do something in the next 20 minutes, we're going to lose him. I know it's not your field, but you're the only person in this county with surgical training." Amanda closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of life or death decisions she'd hoped never to face again. But she also knew what Chief Patterson wasn't saying. In a small town, sometimes the person available was more important than the person technically qualified, and medical training was medical training, regardless of the species you'd learned to treat. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Amanda said, already grabbing her emergency surgical kit from the clinic. "Have Sarah set up the best lighting she can manage, and tell her to start IVs on anyone who's conscious." 20 minutes later, Amanda found herself kneeling on frozen asphalt beside a 16-year-old boy whose femoral artery had been severed by twisted metal from his crashed pickup truck. Blood was pooling beneath him despite Sarah's efforts to control the bleeding, and his pulse was getting weaker by the minute. Amanda looked at the injury with eyes that had assessed similar wounds in soldiers, recognizing the specific type of vascular damage that would be fatal within minutes without immediate surgical intervention. This was exactly the kind of trauma she'd treated dozens of times in Afghanistan. The only difference was that her patient was a high school student instead of a 19-year-old infantryman. "Sarah, I need you to hold pressure exactly here," Amanda said, positioning the EMT's hands while she prepared for emergency field surgery. "Keep talking to him. Keep him awake. Mike, get everyone to shine their headlights over here. I need as much light as possible." What happened next was something the people of Millbrook would talk about for years to come. Dr. Amanda Foster, the quiet veterinarian who treated their animals, performed emergency trauma surgery on a highway in freezing rain, using the same techniques she'd learned saving soldiers in combat zones. Amanda worked with the calm precision of someone who'd done this before, but in conditions far worse than a rural highway. She located the severed artery, clamped off the bleeding, and performed a field repair that stabilized the boy's circulation until the delayed ambulances could transport him to the regional trauma center. By the time the paramedics arrived 40 minutes later, Amanda had treated 3 more casualties: a woman with internal injuries who needed emergency stabilization, a man with a collapsed lung that Amanda reinflated using a technique she'd learned in field hospitals, and an elderly passenger with cardiac complications that required immediate intervention. All 4 patients survived their injuries and made full recoveries. The story of what happened on Route 9 spread through Millbrook like wildfire, but not in the way Amanda had feared. Instead of questioning why a veterinarian had treated human patients, the community began to understand that their animal doctor was someone with medical skills they'd never imagined. Word reached the state medical board, but instead of sanctions, Amanda received commendation for providing emergency medical care under circumstances where no other qualified help was available. The board recognized that her military medical training combined with years of veterinary practice had prepared her to handle trauma situations that would have challenged even emergency room physicians. More importantly, Amanda discovered that her combat medic skills hadn't disappeared. They'd just been waiting for the right emergency to resurface. Over the following months, Amanda became Millbrook's unofficial backup emergency physician. When Doc Williams was unavailable and medical emergencies arose, Amanda was the person the community called. She treated everything from heart attacks to farming accidents, always working within the legal and ethical boundaries that allowed veterinarians to provide emergency human medical care when no other help was available. Amanda never stopped being primarily a veterinarian. Her clinic continued to serve the animals of 3 counties, and her reputation for veterinary excellence grew alongside her recognition as someone who could handle medical emergencies when human doctors weren't available. But she also became something unique in rural medicine, a veterinarian whose combat medical background made her capable of providing advanced trauma care to both animals and humans in emergency situations. Her clinic began stocking supplies that could serve both veterinary and human emergency needs, and local EMTs started referring to her as their backup trauma surgeon. The state medical community took notice of Amanda's unique situation. She was invited to speak at conferences about the overlap between veterinary and human emergency medicine, and to consult on developing protocols for veterinarians providing emergency human care in underserved rural areas. Amanda never went back to human medicine full-time, despite offers from hospitals who recognized her combat medical expertise. She was content with her role as Millbrook's veterinarian, who could also save human lives when circumstances required it. 3 years after the Route 9 accident, Amanda received a letter from Tyler Morrison, the 16-year-old boy whose life she'd saved that November night. He was graduating from high school and had been accepted to pre-med programs at 3 universities. His letter thanked her not just for saving his life, but for showing him that medicine could be practiced with courage, that healing could happen anywhere, and that sometimes the person qualified to help wasn't the person you'd expect. "You taught me that doctors don't just work in hospitals," Tyler wrote. "Sometimes they work in veterinary clinics, and sometimes they work on frozen highways when there's nowhere else to turn." Amanda kept Tyler's letter in her desk at the clinic, next to photos of the animals she'd saved and the grateful families she'd helped. It reminded her that healing came in many forms, that medical training was meant to be used wherever it was needed, and that sometimes the most important surgeries happened in the most unexpected places. Dr. Amanda Foster spent 8 years as a combat medic, saving soldiers in the most dangerous places on Earth. Now she spent her days saving animals in the most peaceful place she could find, but when her community needed someone who knew how to save human lives under impossible conditions, she was ready. Some medics retire from military service and never practice human medicine again. Others become veterinarians who remember how to treat people when there's no one else available, and who understand that the oath to do no harm applies to any creature that needs healing. Amanda Foster was both a veterinarian and a combat medic, depending on who needed saving and what kind of emergency walked through her door. So I ask you, have you ever met someone like Dr. Amanda Foster? Someone whose medical training followed them into new careers, who used their healing skills to serve in unexpected ways? Share their name in the comments. Tell us their story, because here at Stories of Secret Heroes, we believe the greatest healers sometimes treat patients they never expected to see. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all forms. Sometimes they're the ones who know how to heal any creature that needs saving, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Stories of Secret Heroes, where healing has no boundaries.